Welcome to another episode of Threads of Enlightenment. This is my favorite part, is an opportunity to get a chance to welcome our guests. And all of you guys that have been following me, you know that I usually stop and thank them for a couple of things, their time, because time is such a valuable commodity that the beauty about it is that everyone is given the equal amount, 24 hours a day. What we do with that will dictate the type of life. And so I want to thank Alison for coming and spending some of this quality, expensive stuff here with us at Threads of Enlightenment. The other is her journey. It housed who she was, and that journey made her who she is today, this powerful being that is before us, that is about to have us taste some of her wisdom, her triumphs, her victories, her lows, so that you and I can learn to become the best human spirits while we occupy this planet called Earth. Alison, thank you for coming to Threads of Enlightenment.
Delighted to be here.
Excellent. Introduce yourself, tell the people all the things that you do, and let them have it, girl. You go down that list and tell them everything you got.
Cool. I live in Scotland and I help people get back on track. So what I'm really very good at is when you're stuck. I'm not really very good if you're not stuck and you just want a helping hand. I'm very much better at yanking you out of the hole, pushing you around a corner. But although I say pushing and yanking, that's how it may feel, but it's very much more about helping you tap into your inner wisdom. So I absolutely believe that you know the answer, and all the tools that I seem to have mounted around me for the coaching, podcast, training that I do, and writing is all about tools and techniques that help you tap into that inner wisdom. And quite often that's via metaphor because and this is part of my journey, I suppose, that I realized that my logical mind was my biggest enemy, sort of, in terms of my logic will run rings round me and stop me doing things my inner wisdom would like me to do, because the logic will bring in the fear, it will bring in all of the doubt, the criticism. Logic's really good at stopping me doing things, and I realized that logic also stops other people doing things. And then I realized, oh, hang on a minute, but if I use metaphor, logic's gone on a coffee break. Logic's not paying any attention. And metaphor, it's why indigenous cultures have used stories for millennia, are just a brilliant way of us, oh, I see, I need to turn a corner. So if I go and turn a corner in nature, I get insight about my reticence about turning a corner in life, about how easy, and there's a whole load of insight we get because of the corner we choose. So a lot of what I do is helping people get back on track using metaphor, quite often using nature, but also using poetry. So we were talking earlier, and there's a couple of poems that came to mind where I just use words to help people explore a situation. Again, I think more metaphorically than logically.
That is powerful stuff, because I would tell them that is the if I wanted to say this word, the battle, if you will, between the logical mind and the heart, as they say, and making that transition to the other part of you, the deeper part of you that has more information than the logic. The logic is only looking at the natural stuff. And I tell people facts can be changed once you introduce the truth. But that's
Cool.
another conversation. So here we go. Let's go back into your family unit. How was that? Because I like the traveling, the journey, if you will, because a lot of information we receive in our youth that kind of guides our life or create our lives, and then as we find ourselves getting older, as they say, we have to then face some of those information that were deposited in you and I as a young person. What was your family unit like, Alison?
Well, till I was
Siblings,
14,
relationship, all that.
yeah, till I was 14, mum and dad were together. They then separated at that point. I'd got a brother. I would say that I now speak to my brother more than perhaps I did when we were kids. but I think I was quite independent at that point. So I was always, like, even at that point, I was chairman of the area youth council. So I was always into being part of a group. I did, I don't think I was ever very good at sports, and yet I was in every team because I was prepared to turn up and do it.
Yeah.
So I'd be the one that would put my hand up to say, ring me on a Saturday morning and I'll let you know whether or not the game's going ahead or not because of the weather. So I was always putting myself forward for things, and people were always happy for me to do those things. So yeah, quite independent, and perhaps not always doing what I should, ought, or must do. So always pushing at the edges of, conforming.
Alison, why did you feel the need to be independent? You're saying you're 14 years old. Going back a little back, why? What was the family unit like that caused you, if you will, to
I
be
don't
that
know really.
independent spirit?
I don't know. We used to go. I suppose I remember that we'd go off on holidays, be sent off to see our grandparents over the summer, while my mum and dad worked. So I think there was always lots of other people around, and we were spending time with other people rather than it being this very close unit. That therefore meant I was much more comfortable with doing different things and not worrying about. And I suppose when we were at our grandparents', my grandparents had a disused church next door to them. And it had chickens running in and out of this disused church. But there was a pulpit in the church. And I always remember preaching to the chickens as a child, and forcing my brother to listen as well. So, yeah, taking myself off and finding things to do. But they were always about talking.
That's a good way to start practicing as a one of your gifts that you have today is that you're a speaker, and so your audience just happened to be chicken, but you were practicing and moving within your skill set. But your audience, I'm sure they behave just like any other audience. Some of them will leave, some of them will keep noise, and some of them will be quiet. So it's just the same thing. So here you are, because I think that is a perfect picture to show where you did get the independence from, because not being around mom and dad all the time and being escorted to grandparents and others. So you, in that type of atmosphere, if you will, one can become independent, where you're not always, as they say, grabbing onto your mom or dad's coattail or whatever. So here you are at grandma, and you had your opportunity to start practicing your skill set. And your audience, as I mentioned, all types in there. What began to happen to you, Alison, while you were having these conversation, if you will, with your audience? Whether being chicken doesn't mean anything, but you're having this conversation with with an audience already. How did that make you feel as this young girl?
I think the word's empowered, because it was that, and there's something about talking truth. What I've always wanted to talk about, even the area youth council, other organisations that I've done at university, has always been about challenging things that aren't right. But and I suppose it's a right within my own belief system, but it is always I remember writing to a young person's magazine at that age, and encouraging everybody to get out there, join groups, find their tribe, I suppose, in terms of where do you want to make a difference. And it was, we can do it. So there was a definite rallying around, we can do it, you can do it, I can do it, we all have the capacity to do it. Don't believe the lies you tell yourself. Now, I had never realized that I was doing that at that age, but that's what that article said.
Mm-hmm.
I've just been to this youth council and it was brilliant when we had all these ideas, and don't believe that you can't do that too.
See, so there you go. You were honing your
Yeah.
skill, as they said,
Yeah.
at a young age.
And writing as well. That's interesting.
Yeah, because I believe that when we are there in the younger state where we are not bombarded by quote unquote responsibility, many of us have these glimpses and we tap into those gifts that are residing there. But when we do it, people think that, like you were talking about the chickens and in front of the pulpit. Now, you think about that. Here is this building, and most kids would probably just play around and stuff like that in the church. But you went there and you were doing things, you were speaking to your audience, and it carried with you all the way into your youth group and so forth. And so you were pushing the envelopes, asking the questions, expanding the ability of the others as you began to speak to them about who they are and so forth. Here, this young girl now is engaging in this in youth group. You said you felt empowering while you were speaking to your first audience in the rundown church. As you're moving through your youth group and that empowerment feeling that it has with you, how was it changing you, Alison? As you were becoming empowered mentally, what was going on with this young girl as she is uh, in this movement to empower others, even though she doesn't know that she's in there?
Well, I would say I went to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
So I got to university. There was a bit of that empowerment because I was again chairman of a society there. But when I left university, I met who became my husband, and I think the whole of my marriage I was asleep. I didn't think about thinking. I didn't. I don't. Yeah. All I can say is I went to sleep. I didn't think about thinking. I dialed down that empowerment and all of that. And it only came back on again when the marriage dissipated.
Let me ask you a question because this is, yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. Here you are, you are this person that is an empowerer of people, and you had to surrender that. And I love your terminology, sleeping. When you went to sleep, Alison, what was that sleep doing to you? That individual, the inside, what was happening to this woman?
I would say there was a lot of stagnation there. There was a lot of suppression, tired. Yeah, but not very much, not very alive, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah, that's beautiful. I love that terminology, not very alive, because we, yeah, we go to sleep, Allison. We go to sleep and we find ourselves when we move away from us, if you want to say, if we start moving away from who we
Yes,
truly are,
yes.
we begin to get asleep, tired, um, uh, dying, if you will, all of these other terminologies, words that people use. So here you are stressed and dying. And you in this relationship, and you said that after that relationship ended, where where was your world, your mind? Once this thing ended, it crashed, you separated. What was happening to you? Were you um, when this particular incident took place?
I would say I was on the floor and busy trying to get it back. I mean, that's the interesting thing,
Yeah,
isn't it? It's like I've been asleep, I've not been me, and yet the
yeah,
one thing I want to do is go back to go back there, really. It's like, oh no, I don't want this new stuff happening. No. So I spent, I would say, a year or so trying to get that back, despite the fact that everybody else around me would say, oh God, you're back. We can, the Alison that we know is there is more visible now, but there was a denial for me that was true. And then somebody said, oh, I've just been on your neurolinguistic programming course. I think you'd like it. And oh my God, went on that. And then, of course, it just opened me up to who I was and started I suppose, being more aware of how I think and the patterns I run and why I do what I do, and really. And yes, I suppose going back to a conversation we had before the recording about the forgiveness piece and the loving myself, and oh yes, it's all about me, and so that's where I would say the new journey began of me, and perhaps that's why I like to get people out of a hole, because I was in that hole.
Yeah.
And I was there blinkered to the opportunities and not believing in myself. Yeah. And therefore, I like the thought of empowering others, or supporting their empowerment, I suppose is a better way of describing it, in order for them to have that aha.
Yeah. So as you're taking NLP, and I took it as well, and it's really an empowering process that one goes through when you begin to look at yourself and see. As you began to look at yourself, Alison, what did you see when you went through that class?
I suppose what I saw was somebody that kept denying the bits that were my biggest assets.
Yeah.
It's like the outgoing personality, a bit noisy possibly, but you see what I mean? It's that seems to be in the whole lifetime of always shoving to one side oh, I'm too loud, or I'm too me. I mean, I think that's ultimately what I'm doing. It's always, oh, don't be me, tone me down. Yeah. Oh, they won't like me today. Yeah. And that's the journey. The journey is the constant, no, dial up me, be me.
Yeah.
Because I can only be me. I can't be anybody else. And I'm not going to be everybody's cup of tea. That's fine. I can just be the cup of tea for the people that, that get how I do what I do.
Yeah, I remember when I was in my stage with my divorce, and I remember driving. I was living in Florida at the time, and I was driving from I think it was either Jacksonville or Gainesville, coming back into Orlando. And as we all do, I tell people, all of us meditate daily. We just don't know it. And so I'm meditating about my life, and I realized that, hey, Ken, I could make my marriage work, but I would have to die. And I remember having this conversation with myself, Alison, and just talking to myself and say, are you willing to do that? And I came to the conclusion, no, I need to live. What would that look like? I remember having this voiceless conversation with myself, and I stopped my car off of the highway.
Cool.
I'll tell you how abnormal I am. I stopped my car off of the highway, parked it, and started screaming and yelling, no, I am going to live. I am not going to die. And I'm just walking back and forth from my car with my suit on and screaming at the top of my voice. The people driving by must have thought, there's this nut just lost his mind in the middle of the highway. And I got back into that car, and I realized a powerful lesson, that this life is about getting to know you. I wanted to get to know me. And like you said, it is the battle that we have, even after you quote unquote are beginning your journey of self development. The journey of self development simply makes you aware of how important it is
Yeah,
about
no,
you.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
You know, so here you are. You are now learning about you. You're seeing the importance of you. What were some of those, um, for lack of a better word, Alison, what were some of those monsters, those thoughts that you had given permission to become monsters, that you had to sit down and began to dismantle them, if you will, and not give them that permission anymore of being these things that are so big before you?
Um,
What were some of those, and how
I
did you
think
get
it's
out?
I think it's been noisy,
Yeah.
um, or sort of outgoing would be one of them. Um, I also think there was one about only being complete if I was in a partnership with somebody.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
it's I need somebody else in order to. So it took me a while. So I suppose for about 5 years after the divorce, it was always, oh, I need to be in another relationship. And now, I
Yeah.
keep thinking, really? I mean, I haven't been in, and I'm quite happy. And it's that,
Yeah.
oh, well, that'd be nice. And I do accept that. I've spent a bit more time with my mother because her partner's died recently, and
Yeah.
I absolutely accept that we learn more by being with other people. So I've learned more about myself again in the 3 weeks I spent with mum, because you're with somebody 24 hours, whereas I live in a house on my own, and therefore I can not be confronted with how I am with people quite as much living on my own.
Yeah.
But I think it was the, oh, I need to be in a relationship, because I think that was part of the must, sorts and shoulds, because relatives would go, oh, have you found a man yet? It's like, oh, really? Is that is that the first conversation you want to ask me? Um, really? So I think there was, but perhaps they were asking because that was important for me, because I can't remember the last time anybody asked me that. So again, it's that the world is a mirror. So it's not their beliefs, it's my beliefs that they were just mirroring by asking those questions,
Yeah.
which I suppose is another of those hard things to accept, that when you're getting annoyed at somebody else, it's not them, it's you.
Yeah. We're bringing
It's
it. I,
that.
I believe it's, we are calling in and making, something needs to be addressed.
Yeah.
And we are calling the energy to assist us to address that situation, but we never look at it that way. We will
No.
cuss, we will cuss them out when they
Yes.
come up and
Yeah.
start because they're coming. But it is such a sensitive situation. That's why we cuss them out. And so
It's
I
hard.
believe actually that we are calling all of those people in, Alison, to assist us in becoming the best individual while we're here. And if we
Yeah,
live
it's
in that
hard.
state of awareness, again, if you even so, awareness, understanding, there's a understanding within your awareness that these are lessons, opportunity. You will then deal with it and respond differently. And I'm beginning to learn and get some insights into that aspect. So here you are, Alison, you are looking at yourself, you're seeing some of these things, and you're calling the energy, and you are now dealing with them. As you're moving through your life, as you're incorporating these tools to assist you, what were those tools that you had learned from your NLP that you began to incorporate into your life to assist you in your movement, if you will, as you're moving from one state in life to another state?
Yeah, it's interesting. I can always remember, because I started out as in procurement, in purchasing, and I can always remember one of the internal stakeholders that we were working with, one of the team members, turning around and saying, "You're so much easier to deal with since you've done that NLP." And I thought, but she's so much easier to deal with since that NLP. So And it wasn't the fact that I was, suddenly allowing her to get away with murder or whatever. I believed that I was still able to persuade her and influence her to do what procurement, to follow best practice purchasing.
Yeah.
But it was just the way I did it.
Yeah.
The way I was expressing things. And I think that's what happened. The fact that other people could see how how my communication had changed and how that was making life easier for me. And then I sort of became the office coach, really. So if anybody had a problem, go and see Alison. She'll have a tool and technique for that. And then the bank I work for merged with another bank, and therefore we had 3 teams from different areas within the UK coming together. And so I was sort of put in charge of the soft skills of the communication and all of that team development piece for those 2 teams. So again, it was me being able to have permission, I suppose, for using all these tools to help others. And I suppose it was after, I don't know, 5 or 6 years, possibly a bit longer, when I realised there was a law of diminishing returns, that they all knew these tools and techniques, and they could run to me and go, "Oh, Alison, we're struggling. What would you do?" They didn't really need me in the same way, so I left to work for myself. And it was funny because one of the colleagues a few years later said, we still, if we're in a meeting and we're struggling, we'd still say, "What would Alison do?" And then somebody will go, "Oh, she'd do this," and then we'll do that. So, I mean, it was funny because I think it was because some of the techniques were a bit weird. So they preferred to hide behind the fact that, this is what Alison would do. So we're not doing it because we want to do it. We're doing it because Alison would do it. But I mean, I wasn't there. So they were doing it because they thought it was a good idea, Yeah.
That's beautiful, though, that you were making such an impact on others, even after you had left that arena. I'm sure after you had your day preaching to the chicken, you probably made an impact there too. You don't know about it. But here you are, you stepped out on your own, Alison. This is a big decision, if you will, because once you do that, I tell people a salary is just another way of them keeping you
Yes.
in the fence. And so here you
Yeah.
are switching from one source of income to the other, where you're trusting in your ability, your wisdom, your life, and your decision process. How was that transition when you made it? Was it an easy one? Was it a difficult one? What was it like?
It was only possible, and I had one of those car moments like you. It
Hmm.
was only possible because I had one of the when I was driving home through the countryside one time, and I just thought, I have to be prepared to sell the house. I mean, I love my
Hmm.
house. My house is just, oh my God, it's kept me sane. It's got a beautiful view. I can see the sea. And it was that I was attached to that was keeping me in the job, really,
Yeah,
because I had to accept, well, I don't know what's going to happen to the income. Yes, I can trust myself, but I have to be willing to let go of the house.
yeah.
And that enabled me to make the decision. But and it was like I was making that decision at a time where I'd got no savings. I mean, I wasn't prepared to make that decision. Like I hadn't prepared for it. I hadn't planned for it. I hadn't got lots of money ready to sort of tide me over. I just made the decision and sort of did the step forward, trusting something would happen, not realizing really until much later how close I did come, I suppose, to needing to sell the house. It was, so any of those big changes, it's always been, yeah, this is the right thing to do. I'm going to do it, and not think of the
Yeah.
consequences and be more in the moment and go, yeah, it'll work. And I think even though it's 15 years, 16 years since then now,
Yeah.
I think I still go backwards and forwards between the running back to other consultancies that go out and market me and get me work, and me doing my own thing. And and we're back again now at this moment in time, or over the last 6 months, of me going, I've got to put my head above the parapet more.
Yeah.
Let's get out there. That's why I've, willing to be guests on podcasts. It's because I just love talking about being reminded why I do what I do, because for the rest of today, I'm going to be enthused because we've had this conversation and reminded me all about, why I do what I do. So I think that's where I'm at the moment. It's that, it's easier for me to run back to various consultancies that give me work. But I sort of know that I need to do more of and I do incorporate some of the landscaping your life using nature, some of the stuff I do in books, in the work I do for other consultancies. But I know that I need to really, the next step for me, I was 60 last year. It's, what, if I'm not going to do it, I've got to do it now, yeah, come on, girl.
There you go, girl. You go do it. The limitation is with us. I grew up in the church, and I remember this verse that Jesus said, "All things are possible to the man who believes."
Yeah.
End of story.
Yeah, definitely.
End of
I
story.
wrote. I went out yesterday and wrote a poem, and it was very much about that. It's like, it's all in your head. Just do it. Just take that step. It's like, it's not about. I can't remember all of the poem now, but it was sort of it's not about thinking beyond. It's exactly as I explained, leaving that full-time employment. It's like, this is the right step to take. Let's not worry about step 3 or 4.
Yeah, that
we're just going to do one step.
Yeah, that decision comes from deep inside of us. And when it comes, the logic mind would say, this is not the right time. I don't have the savings. I don't have this. I need to have this in place. I need to put that in place. That is the logical mind. And there's nothing wrong with that. And in some cases, people get an opportunity to do that. But most of the time, you will have that decision that will pop out from deep within. And you're looking at your surroundings, and there's none of that what the logical mind would tell you need. And when you step out, you yourself will say, I must be crazy. And you will step out and do it. And and the religious folks and religion calls that faith. And there is a degree of faith in pursuing and doing your personal development, because what happens to it is, once you've discovered your gifts, it usually pushes you and moves you forward into that entrepreneurship aspect of living. And I believe, Alison, that the gift that we have is designed to support us. I believe it is all in one. But fearfulness, the logical mind, that salary that we're programmed to always expect, is the bridge that we have to cross, that little
and I think that's where I'm at, because it's the allowing others, other consultancies to pay me rather than me do it myself. Even though, of course, I've got clients myself. I've written a book. There's a podcast now, but it's very much about, that's on me on Transmit. That's me sharing it with others. And now it's about me having to put my hand up and say, you know what? If you have me as a coach, actually you can get there a bit quicker than if you follow the book. Because if you follow the book, you might not notice some of the patterns that I can notice, because and I think that's what I've observed the last few months, that the excitement when I'm one-on-one with somebody, that last week, for instance, walking through Edinburgh Botanical Gardens and just noticing the patterns and being able to hold up a mirror to their patterns for them to go, oh, I didn't know that,
Yeah, that's the purpose, I believe, of a coach. I tell people, when you're getting a coach, talk to your coach. You want a coach that has been abused and beat up by life, that has been through some mess. You know what I mean? Because what the value and the education and the wisdom that they bring to you will save you from all of those things if you are willing to allow the guidance to switch your perspective, because that coach that has been through much, as you said, they are able to guide you through much faster. They will recognize, and usually it's a question. The coach will ask you a question because they already know the answer to that, but they want you to know the answer to that so that you can see it for yourself. And there's nothing like it. When you see it, that revelation, if you will, we call it that light bulb moment. When they get to that place, Alison, it's theirs. They own it,
Yeah,
and
no,
they
absolutely.
will
Yeah,
have.
no, yeah. Yeah, I
Yeah,
think the other thing is that what I like about coaching is that if I sort of hand myself over to the process, is that I'm as surprised as they are at some of the questions I ask,
yeah,
because I don't feel as if it's my logical mind asking the question. It's either my
yeah,
higher self speaking to their higher self, or whatever the languaging we have around that. My
yeah,
inner wisdom speaking to their inner wisdom, or asking a question based on conversation it's had with their inner wisdom. And therefore, I ask a question and I sort of know it's the right question because I have no idea why I'm asking it.
yeah.
It's not come
I
through the
think,
filters of logic. It's not
yeah,
wouldn't this be a smart question to ask? I'll ask it. Or,
yeah,
this question has worked 1,000 times before. I'll ask it. It'll be, oh, let me ask you this question. I have no idea where this question's come from, but I'm trusting the process enough to know that let's go in this direction.
yeah. I think they trained us in NLP to recognize some of those, the body language that we can mirror others and so forth. And I think when you're having that conversation, I think when you're having a deep conversation, Alison, I believe you have lifted the elevation. I don't believe it is no longer the base level of hi, how you doing, and all this type of
Yeah.
stuff. I think when we open that conversation to the higher principles and so forth, I believe we are lifting them, and you are in tune, just like they trained us in NLP, and you are able to respond because you know it. You see the body language, and in this realm, you're seeing or sensing the spiritual language, and you're able to ask that question, and then they get it, and then you're able to pivot. You see, and they're having this. NLP taught us how to have this body communication as we're engaging in our conversation, is able to affect that communication to a different level. And it's the same thing, I believe, that is happening in that realm, if you will, so that we are able to know, like you said, that question came out of nowhere. It came out of somewhere. It came out of that power, that unity, uh, that you'll find connection, if you will, energetically, and boom, you look at them and they're like, "Oh my God, I didn't know that."
Yeah,
That's
no,
one of the
absolutely.
responses that they would
Yeah.
say. You
I
know,
think I think that's also why I like using nature, because that means I don't even have to ask a question, that
yeah,
they're asking that if we go out into nature and how is this landscape representative of the situation you're wanting resolution about? They notice the patterns in nature, and then all I
yeah,
need to do is ask
hmm,
questions of nature, really. Um,
yeah,
and that and that's hugely powerful, because again, that's coming from within them, so it's not even me imposing anything. It's like, well, you noticed that seed, you noticed
yeah,
that fallen tree, you noticed that corner or that rut. So what is it about that rut that's either a mirror or gives insight about the current situation, which is
yeah.
really
That's
powerful,
powerful.
because then it comes from
Yeah,
within them. They're able to find resolution for themselves.
yeah. That's a powerful relationship that you have with one of the greatest teachers on this planet, nature. and that you're able to partner with nature to assist that individual. I think very few people, Alison, have that understanding about the teacher that is nature, because it has so much information. It's been around much longer than we have, in the sense
Yeah.
of it's awake, in the sense, I told people that we were created on day 6 or somewhere around there. They were created a little earlier than us, so they've
Yeah,
been around
absolutely.
here longer
Yeah, yeah.
longer than us. I tell this person, they're like, no, it's not. I'm like, yeah, they were up before we were. So here you are, Alison. You are engaging in all of this, and people are at work. They're talking about you, even though you're gone. You got your business up and running, and you're having a few clients now. What How did the book come about? I know how your speaking came about. You started
Yeah,
quite
talking to chickens.
quite
Yeah.
quite young. Um, the coaching piece, I could see where that came from, because you've been doing that all the way from a young
Yeah.
girl as well. You started
Mm.
in 14 in the youth group and all the other places. Where did how was the podcaster and the author? Which one came first? And how did it come about?
Author. I would say what came first was the blogger. So back in the
Uh-huh.
day, that in order to help
Yeah.
make sense of what was happening, I'd write. So I'd never write a blog necessarily. The blog wasn't written for other people. It was written for me to help me understand, a particular thing.
Yeah.
And then I'd just post it.
Yeah.
And then that's a really useful reference tool I found, because I've written article or blogs, and then somebody'd say something. So many a coaching session, I'd go, oh yeah, I've written a blog on that. I'll send you the blog at the end, because that might help support what we've said.
Yeah.
So the blogging was definitely the writing piece. And then, of course,
Yeah.
when I suppose YouTube, because I was around before a lot of this was as familiar to everybody as it is now. Then I started doing video blogs that just were even a quicker way of doing the
Mm-hmm.
blogs, I suppose. And again, they're there for reference. So I quite often will say, oh, what about this? And however, I don't know that there's ever been a time, because somebody said to me, but you've always wanted to write a book. But I don't recall saying that. But I think I do think there was I'm writing a book. My hairdresser, when somebody said, whilst I was at the hairdresser's, oh, how long have you been writing a book, Alison? Or how long did it take you to write a book? And my hairdresser, bearing in mind I'd been seeing her at that time 15 years, she said, 15
Yeah.
years. She's talked about a book for 50, all the time I've known her, and she's written about 4 of them. The 5th one is the one that she's got published.
Wow.
So that was her observation. Now, and I that's the truth of it, really. I was always wanting to try and write something, but
Yeah.
I do needlework, but I only do needlework in order to help my own personal growth. So each of the books I'd written until the one that got published were always about helping me. It was like me going through how do I solve this problem that I'm dealing with at the moment, and then the book would be written with that in mind. Always, always, always using metaphor. So as
Wow.
soon as I did NLP, just to go back, where the land using nature came from was that in purchasing, we tried to, in big organizations, we need to get the support of business managers to what we're doing. And most of them don't understand supplier management. It's like, no. And so what I started doing in the mid-90s was use gardening as a metaphor for supplier management, because everybody certainly here in the UK has got a garden. Most people have got a garden. If not, they've known about gardens. They walk around gardens. Oh, well, we need to be mown. They need to be weeded. We need to put time. Some plants aren't going to work in some in some locations versus others. And people went, oh yeah, I know all about that, about gardening. And you go, but that's the same about suppliers.
Yeah.
Some suppliers need time in a greenhouse. Some suppliers, is it any wonder that supplier's not working? Because you're giving them no attention whatsoever. They need pruning, they need watering. Oh, yeah. So that was in the mid-90s. Then NLP taught me, metaphor is how people's brain work. And so I expanded the gardening to nature's landscapes and the supplier management to life more generally, and realized that, you could apply all of that. So every book came at it in a different way. But it was, I mean, I think if I wrote it now, it'd be different, because with social media, it's much easier for people to grasp ideas, because quite often people are finding out about it from social media. But all the books I wrote for me never got anywhere. It was when I realized, so what is the book I'd write for other people? What is a summary of what I've learned? Oh, okay, here's the book. And that's where Can't See the Wood for the Trees came out, because it was, when we're stuck, we use language to describe being stuck, and we are already using nature. In the UK, we'll say we can't see the wood for the trees, or we'll say I'm up a creek without a paddle, or I'm stuck in a rut, or I'm treading water. And we use those sayings to describe being stuck as if that is I suppose, a foregone conclusion. We're stuck, there is no way to see it. But the fact that you're using that metaphor, it's the premise of the book, but that's also got the solution in it. So don't tell me you can't see the wood for the trees, because what would you do in a real wood? And quite often in coaching sessions, then we'd go out to a real wood. The number of times, it happened again last week, we're embodying not being able to see the wood for the trees. We're in a wood, and somebody comes past and we're looking lost, and they go, do you need a map? Now, I mean, and people look at me and they go, well, okay, so how is the map? We've got somebody here offering us a map. How's that representative? How is that a metaphor for what you need in life, about the map? So that's what I love about nature. It's that you can set out thinking, how on earth is nature going to help this problem? And it always does. Always does.
It always does. I tell people, again, I grew up in the church, Alison, and I used to read where Jesus would tell people parables. And, the parables, as I got older and understood the purpose of it, it's designed for all types of thinkers, right brain, left brain, all the information. But people, imagery is one of the most powerful ways to teach. And so he was giving them an image of things, and they can see, these parables, these stories he's telling them. They could see it, and so they were able to understand and get that information from, just like you were doing. So you got the book came from the blog. How did the podcast came around? You said you saw it, but you remember your first time, and what was it? What was it that said, let me go ahead, let me do this,
Well, I think it's because I do know, and I've had some feedback that reading some of the writing cold isn't the same as hearing me do it. There's an element of Alison's, all of what I did with the chickens. It's the performance element. It's that I'm a performing communicator is rather than a writer. So although I write to help inform my thinking, I think I am then a better performer of those words. So I think it was people will like listening to you giggling away when you're there, in nature, because. But what happened was I'm on 3 series of the podcast. The first series was a bit too logical. It was I'm going to do this. I'm going to do a bit of NLP. I'm going to do this. But it was just too logical. And it was inside. It's like, hang on a minute. What's my USP? My USP is going out into nature and doing it outside. So the second series, I think I found my flow, and then, which was very much more about, so each episode has a title, so it'll be Treading Water. So the Treading Water episode has me going into the sea here in Scotland, so it's cold, and treading water and sharing with you as I'm sort of treading water with my mic above me, going, right, well, if I was treading water, this is what you would need to do. It's like, oh, just float or just put your feet down. And so every episode of the second series was me going out into nature. And it's that, coming back to what you were saying earlier about I didn't know that. So I wasn't going out into nature and doing can't see the wood for the trees and regurgitating what's happened every other time I've done it. It was me going out with new eyes today, with whatever's going on in my life today. What do I notice about the wood for the trees today? And there was always something new. There's always something that I'm going, holy whatever. The one I'll share was, I'd written a poem. So on this particular podcast, I was embodying the poem. And the first part of the poem says, some paths are about getting to the next crossroads before we made a decision. So it's not about knowing where we're going. It's just following the path in front of us, getting to the crossroads, and then we can make a decision about the crossroads. So I'm embodying that out in nature. Well, so I leave where I've left, the car park, and I'm going on a path, and I've told myself I can't go anywhere. I don't need to make a decision until I get to a crossroads. Every step was really hard work because I need to know where I'm going. I need to know where I'm going. No, you don't. You're going to the crossroads. No. And at one point, I nearly turned round because for me, well, I don't know when the nearest crossroads is. Oh, no. And really felt, and I'm laughing at myself in the podcast going, I cannot tell you how big the urge is to turn around and go back to the known car park and start again, even though this is not a big wood. So the crossroads that, because I was in a wood I didn't know. I said, but the crossroads that I will come to cannot be far. And yet every part of my being was going, go back. And I just look, and so the podcast, that series of the podcast was just so, there's always me laughing at something because it's me going, well, who'd have guessed that? That's new for me too. And then this second series, I only did a few, and then unfortunately my mother's partner died, so it sort of halted. And I was sharing poems, but it hasn't quite found its flow. So it might be that I go back to what I was doing in the second series, which is picking sayings and embodying them.
That is powerful. You guys that are listening to us, Alison is partnering, and I love it that she's partnering one of the oldest and wisest teachers around, nature. And nature has so much to teach us. And she is taking you, she mentioned a couple of journeys that she was taking you, and how she herself was being stretched and developed as she is learning and walking through nature to surrender. And so it's a great lesson, I think, to learn that she was talking about surrendering. That aspect, I use this as an illustration of how difficult surrendering is. I remember reading in the Bible where Jesus is in this garden, and there he is in his garden. He's sweating blood. He's like, I don't want to go die. I don't want to die, man. And he had to surrender, because I remember reading down a little further down, it says, and he said, not my will, but thy will be done. So it is difficult, that place that we talked about surrendering. We watched this. It tells us that he was sweating blood, and none of us got there yet. But it is a difficult place to put down the logic mind and go and walk and trust your higher self, your spiritual self. Because why? It is an unknown territory. You don't know anything about it. And because it's unknown, one of the very first things that will pop up is fearfulness. And so that's the walk that we have. And here you had Alison talking and showing that transition as she is walking, going into this area. And so all of you guys, we're going to provide the stuff for you to get to her. You need to get to her because, like I said, she's partnering with a powerful teacher, and you're going to learn some stuff really, really quick. And you will be able to get out of your situation somewhat faster than if you're just reading a book, as she said. The book is important because I tell people, I want you guys to get our book as well. The book is important because you're having a private time with the author. And if you are ready, you would allow those words to come and jump off of those pages, reside within you, and change your perspective. This whole thing that we are trying to do is to shift your perspective a slight degree. And when you shift your perspective, you will shift your conversation. You will switch your desires. You'll switch your plans, your purpose. Everything follows once you switch your perspective. And I got you guys a coach. I got you guys a speaker. I got you guys a podcaster. I got you guys an author that is skilled in that arena. Alison, I want to thank you so much for coming to Threads of Enlightenment.
It's been a pleasure. I really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.